Okay. Couple of I'm sorry, Klaus. Couple of house cleaning rules. Please do mute yourselves and keep your cameras off while Pablo is presenting. That's how we're going to show him respect and appreciation for his presentation. And then after that, please open up your cameras because this is a relatively small group and microphone, and then we can definitely get on with the Q&A. So, Pablo, whenever you're ready. Oh,
Okay.
I do apologize for that. Okay, that's very unprofessional on my part. I do apologize, Pablo. Pablo is in this week's webinar. We're going back to Latin America, and Pablo is going to talk to us about the value chains in the bioeconomy and the transformation towards a sustainable bioeconomy. So last time, if you guys remember, we were in Europe looking at European projects. Now we're looking at, I think, Latin American projects. This is also actually novel for me. But yeah, I think we definitely are going back to Latin America as Pablo is in Rosario in Argentina. So Pablo, whenever you're ready. Thank you so much.
Okay, Diego, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to join this Early Career Bioeconomy series. I will present today what is part of my PhD work in the context of this project, the project Sabio, which is a project that studies sustainable transformations in the bioeconomy in Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. It's co-led by the University of Bonn and the University of Münster, and it is funded by the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture. This is actually my first chapter. It's not specifically, I would say, about Latin America. It has a more global approach, but I have included some local examples for us to discuss, or at least to trigger the discussion. And there is a preprint of this work that I have co-authored with my tutor, Jorge Celare, which is here in the room, that you can access if you want to go deeper in the details. I will try to make a short presentation, so I omitted many of the details, but you can access the preprint. The motivation to this research was related to the role that value chains play in driving sustainable innovation, but also the role that value chains play in distributing the value that is created with the actors that take part of that value chain. So the value chains as a concept have an enabling role for the adoption of new and more sustainable bio-based principles, but also to how the value that is created is distributed. The two research questions in these papers are which value chain features may be more conducive to a process of intensified innovation in the bioeconomy. This is our first question. And the second one is in which way these value chain characteristics may affect distribution among actors in the transition to a bio-based economy. Here, our work is more, I would say, prospective or speculative because we don't have a lot of information yet to look at the past. So we are looking at the future, and we are looking at the future based on some information that we already have from some other cases that we will put into the discussion. The gap in the literature for this analysis is that what we see is that many of the existing analyses in the bioeconomy focus on specific sectors. They focus on the conversion between industries and sectors, but with a specific focus on particular industries. And also, there is all this strand of literature about new value webs around several biomass sources. But as we say here, there is still no overarching framework that help us understand in a more comprehensive way which is the role of value chains in bioeconomy innovation. We introduce in the article, we introduce this idea or this concept of a bioeconomy upgrading to characterize the process of intensified innovation in the bioeconomy. As we know, bio-based industries have existed forever. The use of biological principles and biomass to create value has been there forever since since agriculture, I would say. There are many industries: wood, pulp and paper, food and fiber. Then what we have seen in the last, I would say, 20, 25 years is what we call the early stage bioeconomy, which is the use of first generation feedstocks through mature technologies. That has been the base, for example, for the emergence of the industry of first generation biofuels, biogas, and mostly the food and energy integration. This early stage bioeconomy holds, I would say, two problems. One that is based mostly on first generation feedstocks that compete with food. And the second problem is that these processes are biomass intensive. So they require additional biomass to feed this type of applications and industry. And this creates other problems that comes with the increased biomass needs that are related, for example, to direct and indirect land use change. So this is the third stage in the bioeconomy. This is a stage that we are seeing now with the acceleration in biology, biotechnology, and also artificial intelligence, and the convergence between technologies. That is what we call a fully upgraded bioeconomy, that is based on advanced technology that produce high-value bio-based products that use less biomass, that reduce the biomass needs because they are based on some other process, more biotechnology than exclusively on biomass, and that create a higher level of value per unit of biomass. So in the bioeconomy upgrading, we see or we indicate two pillars. One is the environmental dimension that is related to either reduce biomass needs or introduce higher generation biomass sources that do not compete with food or that are less land intensive, I would say, do not compete for land. And the second pillar is the economic dimension, in which we see more value added for the biomass that it is used. We see high value products and services that rely on a lower quantity of biomass. And something that structure our work is that there is a nexus, there is a process of co-determination between what characterizes the process of innovation and the value chain characteristics and feature. What characterizes the innovation process is related to technological risks, how new is the technology or how risky is to adopt the technology, how costly is the technology, and how systemic is the technology in terms of the level of changes that are required by other actors of the value chain, the level of adaptation that is required not only by the company that is providing the innovation, but other members of the value chain. And this is related to the value chain characteristics. For example, if we are talking about a technology that uses very new type of feedstock that requires farmers to adapt their production process, probably the value chain governance is related to a contract, is more integrated, because the company that is providing that is pushing the technology would like to have more control over the process. Or the same happens, for example, if we have technologies that require high investments or that are risky in terms of the result that you might get in terms of high risk of failure, we will probably see more large industries involved. So we will likely to see predominantly concentrated industry structures. Or, for example, if we have systemic characteristics in a technology, it's more likely that we see collaboration and open innovation practices in which not only one company handles the technology, but there is interaction between companies. So these are the three value chain characteristics that we will focus when we study how value chains might change or are changing in front of bioeconomy innovations, and how these new features and characteristics using these three dimensions might affect social welfare or social sustainability or value distribution within the value chain. So have this in mind, because we will go back to this. In terms properly of the methodology, what we did was to propose, based on the industrial organization literature and based on the cases that we are observing in the real world, we propose a typology of value chains exclusively in the context of the bioeconomy. You can characterize value chains through their actors or through their activities or through both, but in this case, we decided to characterize value chains through their activities. Their activities tend to be more constant along value chains. The actors that perform those activities might change. So we define 5 types of activities that are biomass production, considering not only crops, but also waste and other type of feedstocks. Then the bio-based processing, that is the process of transforming the biomass in a bio-based product. The industrial application, that is the use of the bio-based product as an input for an existing industry. And then we have the biotech support and research and development services, which is the science part of this, the biotechnology part of this. And we have final users, which might be final consumers, might be patients, if we are talking about new drugs or new antibiotics or new vaccines, or might be farmers, if we are talking, for example, about new seed traits or new biological inputs. As I say here, on behalf of simplicity, we have excluded many activities such as logistics or marketing or the provision of non-bio-based inputs or financial services that, if we did an exercise of a more intensive value chain mapping, those should be included. But for this exercise, we decided to put the focus on this type of bioeconomy activities. So we came up with 6 different models of value chains in the bioeconomy. I will go through them and I will explain later how they relate with each other or what are the changes that this type of models are bringing to us. In terms of model 1, this is the more traditional model that we have seen in the bioeconomy, in the emergence of the early stage bioeconomy. We have a biomass producers that, for example, it may be a soybean farmer. We have a bio-based processing industry. Here we can talk about, for example, the biofuel industry, the soybean biofuel industry, or the soybean oil industry that uses the soybean. Then we have the industrial application that, in the case of first generation biofuels, could be, for example, a petrol company that blends the biofuel with the gasoline or with the diesel. And then we have final users that are car users. This is a very linear, very simple structure that we have seen this in first generation biofuels and also in some application of biogas, specifically from crops that we have seen in the past. Then in the second model, this is similar, but we have like an association of biomass producers that with their own biomass, they use that to feed their own bio-based processing activity. And this is, for example, very common in the corn ethanol cooperatives in the United States, in which farmers associate to add more value to their corn. And we have seen many of these applications also in Argentina, in which we have farmers association that try to add more value to their production. Then here, model 3, we have this model we have, for example, an industry that is creating their own biomass. For example, a big dairy farm that has manure as a residue, or for example, an orange juice producer that has orange peels as residues, or a company that a timber product company that has wood chips or as a residue, and they try to add, they use that biomass in order to increase the value of their products, or to create, for example, their own energy. This has also been common in companies using residues from their industries to create their own energy. And here in Argentina, we have seen a lot of local biorefineries that have emerged with this logic. Then we move to the last three models. In the first three models, what you see is schemes that are based on technologies that are kind of mature, I would say. And here the challenges in these three models are not related to the technology or developing new technology, but rather the challenge is the organization of this process. For example, if we are biomass producers and we want to add value to the biomass that we produce, we have to organize this. Someone has to lead this. There are new functions in our companies. There are things that we have to manage to do this. But the technology is not the main key point, or it's not the main barrier, I would say. In models 4, 5, and 6, we started to see these more complex applications of the bioeconomy. You see that here we have a new actor, that is the biotech or the R&D company, or an R&D platform, biotech platform company that starts to get involved in the process. And here we have, for example, in model 4, this model, we have a biomass producer, but then we have an association between a company that do the bio-based processing, but also a company that provides the service to understand how that biomass might be better processed. And this is something that we are seeing in industries like the first and second generation of bioplastics or second generation biofuels. We have seen example in the past, for example, for bioplastic, an association between Avantium and BASF that later Avantium bought the joint venture, but it started as an association. Also, Novozymes with Beta in Italy for second generation biofuels. We are seeing this in Brazil with Raízen and Ion Energy producing second generation biofuels. Here, the complexity is that, for example, if you produce bioplastics, the technology is not there yet. You have to develop that. You have still high cost to produce these type of products, and you need to streamline the process from a chemical biotechnological perspective. So it's not that simple as producing soybean biofuel. That is something in which the technology is there. Maybe there are ways to add value to that process, but the main technologies are there. Here, the technologies are not streamlined. So you need this type of association and join the work. And in fact, as I have mentioned, we are seeing many examples of this. Then in model 5, here we have the main actor is the biotechnology company. Biomass here might be there or might not be there, because here what the biotech company do is to use biomass as a catalyzer for more complex processes like synthetic biology. The biomass is there, the biomass is the base of the process, but it's not biomass intensive. We are seeing this type of synthetic biological application in, for example, alternative proteins, nutraceuticals, new food ingredients, new flavor and fragrances. Here, the biomass needs are substantially reduced because the process takes place in a lab. And finally, in model 6, we have processes that are purely biotech-based and do not require exclusively biomass. like, for example, biological inputs for agriculture, new seeds, new seed traits, biosimilars in the pharmaceutical industry or biopharmaceuticals. For example, here we are seeing alliances between Bayer and Ginkgo Bioworks or Corteva and Novozymes in the case of biological inputs. You have a company that has the technology about, for example, plant varieties or crop varieties, but they have to associate with another company that has the platform to accelerate the process of discovery. We have seen this, for example, with the COVID-19 vaccines, with the association between Pfizer and BioNTech, or there has been a recent agreement between Ginkgo and Roche for the development of new antibiotics, new generation of antibiotics. This is very common, but this is a process that is not exclusively based on biomass. It does rely on biomass. So as you may see here, the things start to become more complex. Companies need to have more control of the process. We have new actors that are involved, and we have higher technological complexity. Here, the challenges are not organizing things or managing things, but rather developing new technology. Here, I included, for those that come from Argentina, I included some examples of companies that are working in Argentina, that we are seeing them work, and that are, I would say, their value chain organization might respond to something similar like this. I will not enter in detail in these examples. I just included them as an illustrative, for an illustrative purpose. But these are things that are happening for real. And for example, in Argentina, there is a rather small country, but with a high bioeconomy development. We have we could mention examples of the 6 models that I have just presented. So what is with all this analysis? What is with all the 6 models that I have presented here? The issue is that when you move from left to right in the screen, within the models, what you have is, of course, an increasing potential for a bioeconomy upgrading. These models, 4, 5, and 6, are models that are based either on less biomass, that require less biomass, as these 2 ones, or are based on more, I would say, sustainable sources of biomass, or biomass that, or higher generation biomass, like this one. But for that to happen, the processes are not there yet. You have to develop that. There's try and error process. You have to invest in biotechnology. It's not that you can, I don't know, a biodigester, for example, in this model or in this model, you can buy a biodigester turnkey that is going to be installed in your field. I don't say it's a simple process, but the technology is there. You can buy that turnkey. You cannot buy turnkey the process to develop a new antibiotic or develop a new biological input. That requires from a lot of work and a lot of research, and there is a lot of risk of failure. But also there is more, I would say, value per unit or per kilogram of, or per volume of biomass used. The value that you can capture is higher. So the characteristics of the innovation process, if you follow the arrow, when we move from left to right, technologies are more complex, R&D is more intense, you have higher risk of failure, higher cost of research. And that, if you remember the slides in which I provided the 2 parts of the analysis, technology characteristics and value chain characteristics, this is associated with different value chain features. We see different value chains according to the type of technology we're dealing with. So when we move from left to right, it's likely that we see shorter and more vertically coordinated value chains. Because, for example, let's say that in this case, instead of working with soybean, you're working with energy crops. And you have to incentivize farmers to plant that on their crops. Those are crops that do not have a market anywhere. The market is the company that is telling you as a farmer that they are going to buy their output, your output. So here you need a contract for that. If you're producing first generation ethanol, for example, contracts might exist, but are not strictly necessary. Also, we might see bigger players running this process because of what we have discussed: higher risks, longer research periods. We need some actors that need to be enabling, facilitating these technologies to enter, these new technologies to enter in the value chain. If you are producing a new synthetic compound, for example, a colorant for the food industry, you need the food industry involved. So in the food industry, you have large players that are there. The same happens in the seed industry, for example. And also, we might see higher levels of collaboration between companies, because these technologies are not turnkey, cannot be bought in this way, turnkey and ready to use, and you need to develop those. And we might see some higher level of collaboration, agreements, alliances. So let's move now having said this, now we go to the potential social sustainability effects of this. How would this affect, this change, this bioeconomy upgrading that brings new technologies into the table, but also creates a new way of organizing value chains? What are the welfare or social sustainability effects that we might expect or that we should be looking into? I will be based, as I said before, in the 3 value chain features that I have presented some slides ago. So in terms of value chain governance, as I said, we might expect shorter and tighter value chain, and we might expect a movement from market-based transactions to increasing forms of vertical coordination. So there are questions here in what is the role left for small farmers in this type of upgraded value chains. Is every farmer going to be able to participate in this value chain, or we would expect some forms of segregation? Also, who pays for the additional environmental compliance requirements? We are seeing now a lot of regulations in terms of value chains, in terms of due diligence laws that are going to demand more environmental requirements for those who want to participate and sell in those value chains. And this type of new, more complex bio-based value chains will require that, because we want to ensure that biomass is sustainable produced. But who's going to pay for this? Are these costs going to be pushed upstream in the value chain toward farmers that are the weakest actors, or who is going to pay for this? Are going to be evenly distributed along the value chain? This is a question. I think this is a valid question at this point. And also, this type of vertical coordination agreements, what type of effects are going to bring for farmers? It's not clear that contract farming brings exclusively benefits for farmers. This is something that is not clear, or the evidence, you have evidence supporting the idea that they might bring benefits, but also not. So this is also a question that arises for the future. Then, in terms of the predominant industry structure, as I say, we might expect an enhanced role of big firms, leader firms, or incumbent firms, which in the end are the ones that can deal with sunk costs and steep learning curves. So we might expect, at least in the beginning, potentially more concentration, or at least potentially a more active role of largest firms. So we might see situations in which we have monopoly rents and potential winner-take-all situations. This is something that could happen with some technologies in the bioeconomy. Also, what is going on with countries' capacities? This is also a debate around the bioeconomy and the geographical distribution of the benefits. There is a risk that in this new scheme of bio-based industry, we might replicate something that is seen now, that global South countries are limited to providing biomass, and the royalties of the technology for processing that biomass is on developed countries. So to what extent are we having technologies that will allow countries in the global South, like Argentina, Brazil, Chile, or countries in Africa or Central America, if you want, or Southeast Asia, to develop their own technologies and to earn money from licensing those technologies? And also, what would be the effects of concentration on innovation? Because in some cases, you need concentration to pay the cost of innovations, but also on prices for final users. And also, to what extent this is something that is going to be an issue in the future, to what extent users want this type of new technologies. And this is something, for example, that is discussed in biological inputs for farming. The adoption rates are still low. So the issue of the adoption of communicating the benefits and creating awareness is something that is there for this type of bio-based industries. And finally, this idea about higher collaboration among firms and open innovation practices. We are moving from Turkey to tailor-made technologies, and we have a process of knowledge sharing and technology licensing that will be more active and that will take place faster. So here there is a good point, that is a place for startups. We have a lot of startups, at least I can mention the Argentine case and also the Brazilian case. We have a lot of startups that are working in the invention innovation phase, developing new technologies. But also there are challenges for those startups to upscale and to reach the final users. And there is a huge opportunities for incumbent firms to buy startups and acquire them and put them into their portfolios, which will also increase market power. Also, the effects of collaboration between firms and cross-licensing. We have seen this process in the seed biotechnology industry in the past, in which we have big 6 firms that now are big 4 firms, and we have a lot of process of cross-licensing among those firms, but there were another group of smaller firms that could not access to those technologies. Let's see what happens in the future with this. And also this idea of biased technical change, that of course this higher intensity of complex bioeconomy technologies in this bioeconomy upgrading that we are presented may favor, of course, skilled labor in front of unskilled labor, and that will also create some distributional issues. Just to finish, the original contribution of this paper is the systematization of this overarching typology of value chains and introducing the issue of value chains in the bioeconomy. We feel that future research should explicitly account for these organizational aspects of value chains in the bioeconomy, because there are many changes that are brought to the table, and value chains will necessarily suffer modifications. And it's also, this is critical to understand this type of structural changes, because these are related to the process of distribution benefit in the bioeconomy, and to what extent the bioeconomy could be inclusive of all actors, or we might see a process of increased market power or concentration in the bioeconomy. So thanks for your attention. I finish here, but well, I think we are open to questions.